Hello, everyone. You've arrived at the Osmosis webinar, How to Write Effective Flashcards. My name is Caleb, and I help students in schools study efficiently. I have with me today Amreet Sidhu, a fourth year at the Osmosis webinar, How to Write Effective Flashcards. My name is Caleb, and I help students in schools study efficiently. I have with me Amreet Sidhu, a fourth year student who is also the creator of the Brosencephalon Anki deck. Also joining us is Rishi Desai, our chief medical officer and infectious disease pediatrician at Stanford Hospital. Take it away, guys.
Thanks, Caleb. Brosencephalon here. So we're going to begin with a quick overview and a look at some supporting research, after which we'll dive into top 10 tips, examples, and a final bonus tip to tie it all together. So I want to begin by mentioning a few key ideas I've come to appreciate throughout my experience. Firstly, flashcards are definitely not for everyone. We all have our unique styles, our unique preferences, but flashcards are still one of the many strong tools we can use to become better learners. Our hope is to arm you with a better approach if you decide to try this. Next is the importance of making it an active process, especially when creating cards. It's important not to get trapped in the mechanical aspects of flashcard writing and directly transcribe reference material onto cards. I found that this is not engaging enough and sets a poor foundation for when you go back and review. This can be overcome by writing a question in your own words. Last is an idea from Peter Wozniak's famous rules of formatting knowledge. Learn before you memorize. When it comes to flashcards, it's important to have some sort of pre-existing knowledge of the material. This ensures that you have a coherent structure of that knowledge upon which memorization can flourish. So why flashcards? When you use flashcards, your brain has to actively recall information. And studies show that active recall is a great way to learn. Let's go through a few of these studies so I can show you what I mean. In this study from Science in 2011, researchers took a group of undergraduate science students and split them into 4 groups. Each group was instructed to read a passage from a science textbook in an initial 5-minute study period. They then spent an additional 25 minutes using different ways of studying. Group A read the passage once. Group B read the passage 4 times in a row with a short break in between. Group C read the passage once and then tried to learn the material by concept mapping, which is where they drew a diagram where concepts are represented as nodes and relationships between concepts are represented as lines linking those nodes together. Lastly, Group D read the passage once, and then they tried to practice retrieving that knowledge through an active recall approach. So in other words, Group D, immediately following reading the passage, was asked to type out as much of the material as they could remember, and this process was repeated to match the 25-minute period that the other groups received as well. 1 week later, they were tested with 2 different types of short answer questions. Verbatim questions, for example, what does sea otter fur consist of? A question that assesses their knowledge of information directly from the passage word for word. They were also tested with inference questions. For example, what would be the consequences of removing sea otters from their environment? A question that requires students to connect multiple concepts together. Each study group was measured by the percentage of questions answered correctly, and what researchers found was really interesting. So let's look at how the 4 groups did on the verbatim questions first. 1 week after reading a passage, Group A answered approximately 27% of questions correctly. Group B, which is the group that read the passage repeatedly, answered 45% of questions correctly. And notice here how 3 more rounds with the material only offered students an 18% increase in performance. And they're still forgetting about 55% of the material within a week. Group C, which is the group that concept mapped, scored similarly to the second group at around 42%. And lastly, Group D, the group that practiced active recall, scored approximately 65%, performing significantly higher than any other group. Now let's look at the other type of questions, the verbatim questions, the inference questions. In this case, we see the same spread of results shown in red. Group A scored approximately 26%. Groups B and C scored similarly as before at 45 and 41%. And Group D once again performed significantly better at 69%. Now, this same study went one step further to investigate if the same results would occur for different types of knowledge structure within science and for different types of exam formats. They specifically looked at sequential knowledge, an example being the series of events in digestion, and enumerated knowledge, an example being a list of facts about muscle tissue. They then tested students using a short answer type test to compare active recall and concept mapping together to further gauge the effectiveness of active recall. And again, this time they used both verbatim and inference type questions. The results were similar to their first experiment. On the short answer test, the group practicing active recall, shown in red here, scored 77 and 69% on the enumeration and sequential text, respectively. And this was significantly better than the other group who scored 59 and 48%. They set this experiment up the same exact way, but also tested students using a concept mapping test in addition to the short answer test. And here, the group that practiced active recall once again did better. They scored 48 and 40% on the different types of text versus 28 and 28% by the other group. So again, why flashcards? This is one of the many studies that supports the use of an active recall approach in learning, especially with the aim of maximizing retention. Flashcards are a convenient way for us to practice our recall continuously and can be easily combined with other evidence-based learning strategies. So now I want to take things one step further. There is also research out there that suggests optimal ways to format your flashcards to boost your learning. In a study of undergraduate psychology students, researchers found that a short answer test given immediately after exposure to learning material enhanced final test performance more than a multiple choice test did, regardless of the final test format. The group that received the short answer test, shown in blue, scored 94% and 57% on the final multiple choice and short answer tests, respectively. This was higher than the group that received multiple choice tests, who scored 87 and 53%, shown in red. This study, along with others, suggests that the more effort we spend during recall yields greater benefits to memory retention and test performance. In other words, not seeing the answer and having to come up with the answer is better than having cued recall, where you can see the answer options in front of you and you simply have to pick it. We can maximize this through flashcards by writing them in ways that test our recall more vigorously, such as short answer or fill in the blank type questions. Now, I know that was a lot to take in, but try to keep all of that in mind as Rishi now guides you through our top 10 tips for taking your flashcards to the next level.
Awesome. Thank you so much for going through that, Amrit. The idea here is that we have kind of the why of making flashcards, and then there's the how of making flashcards. And hopefully you're convinced now that making flashcards and active recall actually is a much more effective way of learning, but it's also more efficient, because in that study that he cited, everybody had 25 minutes. So it's not like people were spending more time doing active recall. It's for the same amount of time, you actually get much more bang for your buck, right? So that's the concept here. Now, in making flashcards, you guys all know Brosencephalon is kind of the king of flashcards. And, we sat down and made some, hashed out kind of what were some of the things that he came across, some things that I've always thought about in terms of making flashcards. And number 10 on our list was keep it simple. Only test one fact per card. So there is a tendency to want to kind of cram in all this information, but you want to make sure that doing flashcards is a rapid process. You're just kind of busting through them, and making sure that each flashcard is just one single fact is very key. Number 9, remember the grammar police. There's nothing more terrible or more annoying when going through flashcards than having to stop every few seconds because there's something distracting you. In this case, a bunch of commas that are inappropriately placed and a missing period, right? So just make sure as you're going through it, you do a very diligent job of kind of vetting the extraneous stuff that takes away your attention from the actual content that you're trying to learn. Number 8, minimize the number of words in the flashcard by removing unnecessary words. So again, you can just get rid of things like by removing unnecessary words in this case, right? So it's harder in many cases to actually get rid of the actual extraneous words. It's very tempting to just kind of dump in a bunch of information, but just make sure you try not to do that. Each flashcard should be short and sweet, just kind of nailing that one fact you're trying to remember. Number 7, write a minimum of one flashcard per buzzword. Medicine is loaded with buzzwords, as you guys know. And you want to make sure that your mind kind of tunes into what that buzzword actually is. In fact, it's a good exercise for learning the definitions of these terms, because when you're trying to parse it out, you'll think, okay, is this, for example, afterload and preload? How do I define that exactly? Is that a force? Is that a pressure? What is that exactly? So just really defining these buzzwords helps you learn them as you're going along. Number 6, whenever possible, add help text to make the card, in this case, better or worse. So the idea would be better, right? So adding that help text helps you to kind of focus your brain a little bit to make sure you're honing in on the exact thing that you're probably going to want to get out of that card. Number 5, whenever possible, include help phrases or context in this case. So that offer additional information to provide context. So again, you want to make sure that these little help phrases, the help text, are helping you to, as you're going through, just bust through a lot of these flashcards quickly, because you want to kind of go through them again and again and again. You want to avoid getting stuck on any one. Number 4, try to split up statements to test individual facts. So for example, here's a case. Hypertrophic cardiomyopathy is associated with systolic murmur and an S4 heart sound on auscultation. It's a lot of information about hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. Instead, you could break it up. You could test the systolic versus diastolic part, the S4, and then take all that information and say, okay, does someone actually understand what hypertrophic cardiomyopathy is in the first place? So the idea is here you could actually have 3 flashcards, really making sure that not only do you understand this kind of all together, but that you understand each part of this statement really well. Number 3, be consistent with your flashcard style. Again, this is to avoid distractions. You don't want to have unnecessary bolding and italicizing and font changes. You want to just allow your brain to kind of easily absorb that flashcard and just focus on the part that you really care about. Number 2, write flashcards consistently. Don't try to cram. This is probably one of the most important and most relevant things for most med students that are kind of taking exams and also taking boards and thinking, okay, I'll just write a bunch of flashcards right before the exam or the boards. It really is helpful to make sure that you write them consistently throughout your study period, so you're not doing them all at the same time, usually at the last minute. And the number 1 kind of tip I can offer is use your flashcards. And that might seem obvious, but what happens a lot of times is people put in tons of effort and energy into making flashcards, and then they realize, wait a second, I only have a week left or 3 days left before my exam. And you're not really taking advantage of the fact that you've got this awesome deck of cards. So make sure that you front load your time, do it consistently over time, so you have enough time to kind of go over your flashcards over and over and over again. So that's the number 1 thing. Obviously, we're all here to learn about flashcards. It's important to make sure you're doing a good job with writing them and spending time on them. So let me hand it back to Amrit. He's actually going to go through some concrete examples now, applying these top 10 tips. Back to you, Amrit.
Thanks, Rishi. So stemming from those tips, I put together some examples for you guys that also touch upon some of the common questions I get, and will hopefully also touch upon some questions you guys might be holding, watching this right now. So the first thing I want to talk about is using help text. Using help text and keywords or phrases is a simple but extremely powerful strategy to make your flashcards better. They provide vital context that guides your recall, reinforces memory cues, and will also eliminate any guesswork when you're reviewing. They also allow you to maximize your efficiency so that when you review these cards, you're not stumbling through them. So in this first example here that we see, it's not entirely clear what disease is being tested. But in the second example, some simple keywords and some simple key clauses make it a much better flashcard. Now, next I want to talk about is sets and lists. This is one of the biggest obstacles. It's traditionally considered a bad thing to test lists and pathways through flashcards, but they are unavoidable in medicine. The best way I've found to tackle this is through simplification. Let's consider a disease like lupus, which affects many organ systems. It's pretty overwhelming to review a flashcard that asks, what are the signs and symptoms of lupus? But if you simplify things and break the disease down into subsets of signs and symptoms, you can get through all of the details about lupus in much more digestible bits without being overwhelmed and frustrated as you review. The added benefit of this is that it ensures you maintain an active process. By computing the material and breaking it down into smaller bits, you create your own framework for memorization. The downside is that you'll end up with more flashcards to review, but in my experience, this is just an illusion of more work. The volume of material hasn't actually changed, and while more cards to review might seem more daunting, you are more likely to both get through the material and retain it much more easily. When it comes to pathways now, I would recommend taking the same exact approach with sets and lists, simplification. However, with pathways, we can use fill in the blank type questions to our advantage. In this example here with the direct basal ganglia pathway, each step in the pathway can be made into a blank on a separate flashcard to test your knowledge. And we can also employ short answer type questions to review pathways. We can use it to reinforce rules and key details about the pathway to supplement any fill in the blank type questions that you make. Now, I know these tips and examples were, again, a lot to go through, but I hope they provide you with a better idea of how to make stronger flashcards. Rishi is now going to tie everything together with a bonus pro tip that you can combine with flashcard writing.
All right, awesome. So you guys are all here because you're trying to understand the science behind flashcard writing, and flashcard writing is a major part of learning new information because, of course, medicine is like a language, and anytime you're trying to learn a new language, flashcards are often quite useful. There are other important techniques in the learning science that we know improves how well you learn and how well you retain information. We actually went ahead and made a video called The Testing Effect. You can look this up on YouTube. We also made another video called Spaced Repetition. You can look that up on YouTube as well. This bonus pro tip is essentially to say it's ideal to use these strategies. If you can use these strategies together, that's even better. So anytime you have a chance to kind of recall information using an active process, that's ideal. And if you can kind of focus on the areas that you're weak at, which is kind of what spaced repetition tries to do, if you can do it, using different types of testing strategies, which we go into in the testing effect video, all those things combined is really synergistic and works even better. So that's the bonus pro tip, is to kind of think about these other learning science strategies as you're studying. And here are the references. There are some comments in the live chat about what references are we citing. You can take a screenshot of this, or we're going to be recording this. You can look at it later. But these are the papers that have been out there. And the most important thing to note is that these are papers from, all the way back, 17 years ago, if you look at 1999, and more recent ones as well. This is not something that is brand new. It's just that we're trying to apply it for the first time in medical education. And it's becoming more and more mainstream to do that. So there's some great science out there. We encourage you to look at the original papers where we pulled out the data. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Caleb.
Hi, Rishi. Thank you. Great. So Amreet and Rishi have described a lot of really cool ways for you guys to become expert flashcard writers, which is one of the best ways to become a more active learner. I just wanted to go over a few of the things that you can do regarding flashcards on the Osmosis platform. But even more generally, a couple of things just to keep in mind about Osmosis is that we've really designed it to be a personal learning assistant to consolidate all of the possible resources that you use so that you spend more time studying and less time managing resources. We also have a content library of over 20,000 plus questions and flashcards that you can use in addition to the flashcards that you make for yourself. Finally, we have a growing video library that reinforces core concepts from all of your preclinical medical education. We also have great patient videos and pathophysiology videos to augment all of that. And last but not least, you can optimize your exam prep by integrating all these resources in one place and get all kinds of practice questions scheduled for you. We are in the last few hours, or I guess we have about a day and a half left in our current cardiovascular pathology ebook promotion. This is going to be good until midnight tomorrow, and that gets you 30% off. Just a couple last things to touch on some of the flashcard stuff. So Anki is a great platform, and we're big supporters of it. And we've gotten some questions about how we differ from Anki. There's just a couple of key things to keep in mind. Osmosis lets you collaborate with anybody, be it a classmate or a friend. Osmosis will also hyperlink any key term or concept that you write into your flashcard, matching it to concepts in our library. And finally, we'll also provide you a platform where you can easily write flashcards and have them be integrated and attached and associated with all of your curricular slides. So if you answer a flashcard in 2 weeks about cardiomyopathies and you wrote it, 2 weeks ago in relation to that lecture, we'll make that association for you right there on the screen. And this is a way for you to further contextualize that information. But in any case, I hope that everyone who came to this webinar got something out of it. We really do believe in active learning and flashcard writing, and we really believe that there are better ways to go through everyone's medical education, and we hope that this is helpful to you all. With that said, I want to thank our guests Amreet and Rishi, and thank you so much, and have a great day. We'll be sending out recordings of this webinar directly, so please stay tuned. If you have any questions, you can contact us at hi@osmosis.org, or you can contact us in the help center within the application. All right, thanks so much. Bye.